Right, so for as much as Israel seems to not only be getting away with, but succeeding in clearing the north of Gaza of all civilian life, the enactment of the so-called general's plan to take out Hamas by literally taking out everyone still there if they haven't left already, every bit the extremist action it very much sounds like, but things are not going according to plan in Lebanon for them to quite the same extent. In fact, anything like the same extent. Southern Lebanon is very much a different kettle of fish, mountainous and inhospitable to IDF soldiers who have never fought there before and learned about doing so from a book or a training course, not actually having had boots on the ground there. They're not allowed, you see. That's against international law. But whilst they have also never faced Hezbollah face-to-face on the ground on their patch before, they've never faced the UN itself, as the UNIFIL peacekeepers also refused to give ground to them, doing their jobs, standing firm, defending the Israel-Lebanon border region and earning international plaudits for it. From the Irish peacekeepers who wouldn't move for them, to those deliberately targeted by the IDF at their own UNIFIL headquarters, now being revealed to have been targeted with laser sights before being shot at by a Merkava tank. The scale of the losses Israel is experiencing itself as a result of its war criminality in Lebanon might be considered karma by many, in which case. They've never been able to successfully invade Lebanon before, and they're not getting very far in trying to now either.
We began our duty at 4 a.m. on October 10th, and we were posted up there in observation post 14 in UNIFIL's headquarters in Nakura. We suddenly noticed a laser beam targeting us. We immediately started surveillance and reconnaissance and took the initiative to turn off the lights on the 4th floor and turn on the lights on the 2nd floor. After that, we looked from above to assess the situation and coordinated with the other tower there. After communicating with that tower, it was indeed confirmed that the laser was aimed at us. We immediately reported to our higher command, and just after, a projectile was launched from a Merkava tank and hit our observation tower right there. When the tank shell exploded inside, we were thrown upward and then tried to find an escape route. I jumped from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor and jumped again to the 2nd floor, rolling over, fearing a second attack. We then made our way to the shelter to be picked up and evacuated by the hospital team. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Private Egi Arifianto, and I am Corporal Private Nofrian Siaiputra. We are the two peacekeepers who were posted at Observation Post 14 on October 10th in Nakura. After the incident, we were in intensive care for 3 days in the UNIFIL hospital, and now we are back in very good condition. As UNIFIL peacekeepers, we are ready to carry out our next mission and uphold UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
Right, so that was a video clip there of the recounting by the two Indonesian UNIFIL peacekeepers who were thrown from their watchtower by tank fire on the 10th of October. Hospitalised for it, now thankfully fully recovered. An attack as this was on UNIFIL's headquarters in Nakura in southern Lebanon and some 36 miles west of the position of the Irish UNIFIL peacekeepers, who were essentially being used as human shields by the IDF as they fired upon nearby villages several days earlier than that. It's reassuring to see these people back on active duty. It's fascinating to hear the story from their perspective, horrifying as it is in equal measure. Attacks on such people, a direct attack on the UN itself, as this is. These peacekeepers, having had their annual remit to defend the border between Israel and Lebanon, as they have done since 1978, just renewed unanimously by the UN Security Council, begging the question of Israeli allies like the US and UK, who are permanent Security Council members, as to whose side exactly they are on here. Such actions against UNIFIL are completely uncalled for, completely unsupportable, regardless of your views perhaps as far as Hezbollah go, certainly as far as the UN go, where Israel have a mandated requirement to not harm UNIFIL peacekeepers as a UN member state or any UN worker, although We've just recently heard of another death amongst the UNRWA staff. But irrespective of that, whether it be UNIFIL, UNRWA in Gaza, or Hezbollah, or the Lebanese army itself also involved, Israel having an absolute mare trying to make any progress in its latest attempted invasion of Lebanon. Those Merkava tanks, which are so feared and have wreaked so much havoc and damage in Gaza, are not nearly so effective in Lebanon, despite stories such as that of the one which fired upon that UNIFIL HQ in Nicosia. The mountainous terrain is barely passable for these machines in some places. But even going back to the last war between Israel and Lebanon in 2006, Hezbollah were always better trained and far better armed than Hamas have ever been. Had the measure of these tanks at that point with anti-tank guided missiles called cornets, and it seems despite attempts to counteract Hezbollah's tactics on such things, they're still failing miserably, as this excerpt from the Cradle's Anis Rais makes clear why. The Merkava, long regarded as the symbol of Israeli dominance in ground warfare, was designed to excel in direct combat. However, in the unforgiving Lebanese terrain, the Cornet missile revealed a critical vulnerability. The Merkava's reliance on heavy armour, which despite its thickness, was helpless against the Cornet's ability to pierce reactive plating. The missile's precision focused on the tank's soft spots, its engine and lower hulls, areas that conventional defences struggled to protect against long-range guided strikes. The once formidable Merkava, crippled in its ability to manoeuvre through Lebanon's rugged landscape, became an easy target for well-planned ambushes. Now, with Israeli convoys once again making daily incursions into Lebanon, repeating the very missteps of 2006, it's as if history is whispering its warnings, only to be ignored. Israel's persistence in retracing these familiar steps shows a refusal to reckon with past lessons, locked in a cycle that leads to the same inevitable failures. So arrogant they think they can win this time, or just following Einstein's definition of insanity? Why pick just one reason, Damo? It might be both, and of course you might be right in that. But such is repetition of Israel's vulnerabilities with their precious Merkava tanks. They have attempted to counteract the Cornet missile this time around, to hilariously failing effect though. Rafael Defense Systems, the Israeli arms firm, came up with a fix for this called the Trophy APS, effectively a mini Iron Dome system, if you like, to ward off anti-tank strikes against their tanks. The trouble is, this system has all of a 1.5 second reload time, and where the Russian-made Cornet wasn't quite up to exploiting this window of time, Iran have basically taken the Cornet and produced a variant of it called the Tat-Belavia, if I pronounce that right. And this, alongside an Iranian anti-tank missile system called Tharala, this can fire two missiles in very quick succession, so that where essentially Trophy APS reacts to the first missile, the second one hits before it can reload. As a result of this, certainly in part but not in entirety, the losses to Israel have been absolutely catastrophic once again. According to a Hezbollah report broadcast by Lebanese news outlet Al Mayadeen, whose offices incidentally were struck in Beirut in an Israeli airstrike just yesterday, censorship by force, the losses by Israel now include 28 of their Merkava tanks, 4 military bulldozers, an armed vehicle and an armoured troop carrier. More than 70 IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 600 injured. 3 US-made Hermes 450 drones and a Hermes 900 drone have also been shot down. All of these are from Israeli attacks within Lebanon itself. They don't count the Hezbollah strikes in retaliation happening in the north of Israel at all. This is just what has happened by the Israelis crossing into Lebanon, crossing that border, crossing the blue line, as Israel attempt to make progress and consistently fail at it. They've not gained control over a single village. They've barely been able to advance more than a few miles before being driven back. One incident the report details, there are many such examples in this report, all detailed on Al Mayadeen, it's quite a lengthy report, was of Israeli soldiers taking over a municipality building in the middle of a village, who were then ambushed by Hezbollah, and the Israeli army evacuation to get their people out itself then took hours too, because they kept getting ambushed by Hezbollah as well. Israel just haven't got a Scooby what they're doing once they've crossed over into Lebanon, but Hezbollah definitely know their own land well enough. For as much as the IDF is made out to be this superior armed fighting force, as well as the most moral army in the world, it's easy to present images of that when they claim to be fighting terrorists in Hamas, when the reality is they were instead mostly targeting women and children in Gaza, as the civilian death toll attests to. But again, far more formidable and better armed forces, when they face up against that, the likes of Hezbollah, the likes of the Lebanese army, the likes of UNIFIL, they're crumbling. And that's all despite the US supplying weapons and UK supplying intelligence. You'll be hard-pressed to find anyone but the hardest, most nailed-on Zionist showing an ounce of pity for what they're doing now, though. Though, of course, any loss of life is regrettable, especially when it's so avoidable. And it is so avoidable. If these soldiers believed what they were doing was a war crime, they could justifiably refuse. I don't think many people actually realise that IDF soldiers actually are entitled to refuse. But they don't. And for as long as they don't, then that is on them. For as long as Netanyahu insists on continuing to throw lives away trying to invade Lebanon, though, quite clearly they will continue to be repelled. Of course, it isn't just their war on the ground in Lebanon that is blowing up in the faces of Netanyahu and his mad government either, but the war of words is as well, especially in the media. Where Israel have been able to clamp down on information getting out of Gaza, occupied territory by them as that is, Lebanon have opened their arms to the world's media, and all those excuses Israel made for the targets they hit in Gaza, from hospitals to schools, 196 schools in Gaza having been struck now, on official figures incidentally. The same allegations made against Lebanon for those buildings, being Hezbollah bases, hasn't washed, as the media gets free tours to see everything. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.